together and discuss some issues jointly. And technology has given us enormous uh, boost to do this even after we were locked down because of the COVID pandemic. Before we start our discussion today, uh, I request all of you to kindly mute your audios so that there are no echoes. You can send me your questions through the chat box, which I will try to collate and ask, permitting the. So let us start the session. First of all, let me welcome both the dignitaries, His Excellency Ambassador Kudashev, who is Russia's ambassador to India, and His Excellency Ambassador Verma, who is in Moscow representing India. Let me first introduce uh, Ambassador Kudashev. He has graduated in 1981 from Moscow State Institute of International Relations and joined immediately to the diplomatic service. He worked in USSR and Russian embassies of Singapore, Philippines, and India. So this is his second tenure in India. And last time he was here for a long. Can you please mute your microphones, please? Uh, then he was Minister Counselor of Russian India from 2002 to 2005, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Russian Federation of the Republic of Philippines, and concurrently Ambassador of Republic of Palau, the Republic of Marshall Islands, and Federal State of Micronesia. Since 2015, he was Deputy Director of Secretariat General, Department of Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, hold diplomatic rank of Minister. And since August 2017, he has been the Ambassador Extraordinary of the Russian Federation to the Republic of India. Early, I would like to introduce our India's ambassador uh, in Russia, His Excellency Mr. D.B. Venkatesh Verma. He has joined Indian Foreign Service in 1988. He is MA and MPhil International Relations and with a specification and specialization in disarmament studies. And before going to Russia, he was in Moscow. Again, this is his second tenure in Russia. He was there before from 1990 to 1992. Then in Tashkent, then I also worked as Undersecretary in New Delhi. Then he was in Geneva, and second tenure was in Moscow again as a first secretary, and then worked a lot on the disarmament. He also worked as in a Prime Minister's office from 2004 to 2007, and then again in Geneva and Madrid before joining in Moscow in 2018. So we also have several professors, dignitaries, the directors of the think tanks in this audience today, and therefore I'm sure the discussion will be very enriching and it will be a treat for all those experts and enthusiasts and students of foreign relations to discuss this historic ties between India and uh, Russia. So before I welcome all of you, again I request you to kindly mute your audio systems. And now I request His Excellency Ambassador Kudashev to uh, give his talk. Ambassador, sir. Ambassador, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador Varma, my friend, dear Mr. Shatoivani, my friend, guests and members of the club. It gives me pleasure to interact with you today, and I'm very glad to have such an opportunity to discuss our today's bilateral agenda as well as exchange views on topical international issues. As you know, contacts between Russia and India have been slightly affected by the situation around the COVID-19, shifting focus to telephone conversations and video conference, like the one, which are conducted on high and highest levels. Nevertheless, we see that our cooperation under the leadership of the Russian President, Mr. Vladimir Putin, and the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, remains solid, comprehensive, consistent, and nowadays gradually regain its strength after the pandemic started. It couldn't have been otherwise, given the significance of this year. In 2020, we mark the 20th anniversary of the establishment of our strategic partnership, the 10th anniversary of their special and privileged status, as well as 75th anniversary of victory in the Second World War and establishment of the United Nations. Moreover, it is the 550th anniversary of the first contact between Russia and India, documented in a book, The Journey Beyond the Seas, telling about a voyage of the Russian merchant Afanasy Nikitin to India in the 15th century. Let me say a few about our bilateral cooperation. The 20th Jubilee Russia-India Summit on September 4 to 5, 2019 in Vladivostok opened a new page in our cooperation with the focus on complementarity of our development strategy, along with traditional areas of interaction, such as energy, science and technology, military and technical partnership, people-to-people contacts. We are moving towards enhancing our multifaceted relations in the Russian Far East. This is a game-changing move. This region is rich in natural resource and industrial capacity. The Russian government is implementing dedicated national programs, ensuring its maximum economic and social integration in the Asia-Pacific community, introducing preferential tax regimes and various government support measures, making business and investment climate there more attractive. The two sides decided to expand joint development of hydrocarbon fields in the Russian Far East and the Arctic offshore zones, as well as to increase oil supplies from Russia to India, seeking long-term arrangements. Along with electronic commerce and further tax and customs harmonization, cooking coal production, gas fuel, alternative energy, timber, shipbuilding and diamond industry, we are also working on the re-establishment of the direct Vladivostok-Chennai maritime sea route and the raising effectiveness of the international north-south transport corridor, employing satellite surveillance. An early conclusion of the free trade area between the Eurasian Economic Union and India is also on the cards. In the conditions of outside pressure, more than 30% of our bilateral trade comes in national currencies. It helps reduce costs and risks of transaction. In the framework of the Working Group on Banking and Financial Matters, as rates will also be alternative. No doubt that implementation of the above agreements would further to progress in achieving our goal to reach the turnover up to $30 billion by 2020. A few remarks about the signature project. Russia is still the only foreign country which is involved in construction of nuclear reactors in it. Our key project is the Russian design Kudankulam nuclear power plant in Tamil Nadu, comprising of 6 blocks. The first two units are already operational, generating low-cost power for local customers. The rest are under construction. This project represents a unique and solid contribution to the Indian carbon-free energy security, employment and education of Indian specialists in many sophisticated areas, important working on joint development and production of military equipment, components and spare parts, improving after-sales service system. Relevant intergovernmental agreement was signed last year in Vladivostok. The overall amount of current deals exceeds $16 billion, including sophisticated projects such as S-400 air defense system supply, joint production of Kamov 226 multi-purpose helicopters, 140 units, and Kalashnikov machine guns in India, supply and construction of advanced frigates. Importantly, under the Make in India program, we are achieving a great scope of localization of production, up to 80%, with the possibility of supplies to third countries. In addition to that, sides agreed on supplies of 21 MiG-29 fighter jets and 12 Sukhoi 30 MKI aircraft. In the context of military cooperation, we enjoyed the largest in scale 3 services, bilateral exercises, Indra, regular dialogue between ministers of defense and heads of national security council. We also have reached an advanced scientific and technical partnership, covering long-term joint research programs as well as development of high-tech products in such spheres as telecommunications, robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, space, pharmacy, and others. At the Vladivostok Summit, the MOU for cooperation in the field of innovations was signed, opening the way for cooperation between national innovation ecosystems. Our cultural and civilizational affinity is yet another area of traditional engagement, grounded on philosophical thoughts shared between Lev Tolstoy and Gandhi, heritage of Rorik's family, and ever-growing students' exchange. We enjoy successful practice of holding reciprocal festivals of culture, as well as film festivals. Remarkably, Russia was the focus country of the 50th International Film Festival in 2019 in Goa and the 44th International Kolkata Book Fair in 2020. A few words about international cooperation, and first and foremost about the 75th anniversary of the victory in the Second World War. We inevitably link the current stage of the international relations with the post-World War II order. Survived after unprecedented atrocity, originated from ideas of Nazism and fascism, the world should never forget these lessons. And we must cherish the main achievements of the World War II. Creation of the United Nations and the end of colonial era. 75 years ago, the Nazi Germany was defeated with major military contribution and sacrifice of the Soviet Union. That was the decisive moment in the World War II. However, according to estimates, 27 million of Soviet people died in that war. We call it the Great Patriotic War, as you know, and that's why. The principles stipulated in the UN Charter, such as sovereign equality of all nations, resolving international disputes by peaceful means, refraining from the threat or use of force, non-interference in domestic affairs, respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity, etc., should further guide us in international relations to prevent conflicts and promote peace based on mutual respect and understanding. The United Nations Charter is obviously a key element of the Russian-Indian diplomatic relations and our consistent support of it is also one of the basic reasons why our global and regional approaches are often similar or even coinciding. Nowadays, it is vitally important to prevent the attempts to distort or rewrite the history to avoid the mistakes of the past. In this regard, we highly appreciate India's co-sponsorship of the Russian proposed United Nations General Assembly annual resolution against glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism, and other contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related. Considering the above, for us, it was immensely significant that Prime Minister Narendra Modi was ready to attend the parade dedicated to the 75th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War on May 9. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to postpone the event for June 24. We highly appreciate participation of the Indian side in the events dedicated to the Victory Day celebrations. Special thanks to the Indian contingent, comprised of representatives from the land, air, and naval forces who marched at the Red Square on that very day. We are also very glad that the Indian Defense Minister, His Excellency Mr. Rajnath Singh, had witnessed the parade and the fruitful discussions with the Russian counterparts, including Deputy Chairman of the Russian government, Mr. Yuri Borisov. Globally, Russia and India jointly promote just and equal multipolar world with greater role of major developing countries and emerging economies in the global governance. That also includes consistent Russian support to the permanent membership of India in the reformed United Nations Security Council. We are absolutely like-minded in terms of vital importance of strengthening the United Nations and resolving global and regional challenges and conflicts collectively by peaceful means. We are against any unilateral, geopolitically motivated actions and illegal extraterritorial sanctions which create instability, mistrust, and unpredictability. This shared approach is vividly materialized in our growing coordination in various United Nations bodies, G20, BRICS, SCO, RIC, EAS, OPCW, and other organizations you name. Regionally, we endeavor to create a space of peace, harmony, and prosperity, which stretches from Jakarta to Lisbon, by promoting the great Eurasian partnership, a broad connectivity framework with the participation of the Eurasian Economic Union, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, ASEAN, potentially European Union, and other interested associates. We welcome the growing Indian contribution to the SCO. The decision of New Delhi to host the next heads of states, heads of governments meeting later this year in autumn is especially encouraging, and we reiterate our full support in this. The Russian presidency in BRICS and SCO in 2020 also had to adjust formats of the events, shifting focus on video conference. Just recently, we have conducted successful BRICS and SCO virtual ministerial meetings. Also, on June 23, we had a very constructive RIC Foreign Ministers virtual conference, which demonstrated our common desire to further expand the trilateral agenda, including by involving defense ministers dialogue. On July 2, we also had the meeting of BRICS Sherpas, two Sherpas, via video conference. The participants discussed topical issues of five-sided cooperation in the framework of all three areas of BRICS strategic partnership, policy and security, the economy and finance, and cultural and educational content. COVID-19 pandemic urged us to adjust the schedule of our high and highest level contacts a bit. But they did stop. Our leaders, foreign ministers and senior officials were in touch with each other in bilateral and multilateral formats, implementing decisions of Vladivostok summit held last year and jointly dealing with current challenge. As you know, the BRICS and SCO summits were postponed until autumn this year, and we are hopeful to have our regular bilateral summit with India at the same time. Uncertainty in the field of strategic stability is the cause of our growing concern. Unfortunately, the US continues to dismantle the post-World War II collective security architecture, opting to withdraw from international arms control arrangements. They pulled out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 2001 and from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019, baselessly blaming Russia for non-observance and making their hands free to continue building their strategic capacities and arsenals. All this potentially can create new tensions in Europe and other regions, including Asia Pacific, prompting a new arms race. Notably, in response, Russia made a voluntary commitment to not be the first to deploy land-based medium and short-range missiles and suggested that other countries should join this moratorium. That was also rejected by the US. The United States also opposes the idea to conclude a treaty on preventing the deployment of weapons in outer space, thus trying to preserve a freedom of maneuver. There are other issues which negatively affected the West's relations with Russia, specifically NATO's eastwards expansion and its nuclear missions in non-nuclear states. The matter of concern is also creation by the US of an extensive infrastructure with destructive biological capability in other countries, in particular Central Asia. In Asia Pacific, we jointly promote the universal principles of undivided security, supremacy of international law, peaceful settlement of disputes, and non-use of force or threat of force. We cooperate closely for this purpose in the framework of the East Asia Summits, the ASEAN Regional Forum, ASEAN Defense Ministers and Dialogue Partners, ADMM+, etc. Let me touch upon the issue that can potentially create new alienation. We know the proliferation of Indo-Pacific countries, initiated and promoted, first of all, by the United States, Australia, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. The Russian foreign minister dwelled on this at the recent Raisina dialogue in New Delhi, pointing out that it is an attempt to reconfigure the existing structures and to move from ASEAN-centered consensus-seeking forms of interaction. What is important that ASEAN and India positions with regard to this are the same. Indo-Pacific strategies should not be discussed in a containment categories, while we should promote unifying forms. To conclude these introductory remarks, and I'm grateful for being extended an opportunity to make them. To conclude at this point, let me reiterate that Russia and India really enjoy an excellent level of cooperation, which is indeed comprehensive. I am confident that further consolidation of the Russian-Indian cooperation at bilateral, regional, and multilateral level will become an ever more important factor in global and regional affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Ambassador Kudashev. It was quite an extensive presentation touching almost all the points of interest of our audience. I really appreciate for your comprehensive speech. Now I request His Excellency Ambassador Verma to give his talk. Ambassador Verma, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vijay Chautewala. Warm greetings to you from Moscow. I hope I'm audible. Excellent. First of all, let me thank you and convey a very deep appreciation for you having taken this initiative to bring India-Russia relations onto a web platform so that friends from both India and Russia can join in and find a way of carrying forward what is a very rich discussion always. And we heard with great interest the statement made by our dear friend and distinguished colleague in India, His Excellency Ambassador Kudashev, and we would like to thank him for his service that he does for his country, but also for strengthening India-Russia relations. And I'm absolutely delighted that several friends of India and Russia are today joining in this conversation, and we'll be having an opportunity to hear them as well, including Dr. Arvind Gupta from the Vivekananda Foundation, who's contributed so much. And similarly on the Russian side as well, we have a number of friends that will be contributing to this. So this is indeed a very good occasion. On the 2nd of July, Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to President Putin to convey his warm greetings on the 75th anniversary of the Victory Day celebrations that took place on 24th June, at which our Defense Minister, Raksha Mantri, Shri Rajnath Singh, participated along with an Indian military contingent that was widely applauded. The leading part of the Indian military contingent was the 163-year-old regiment troops from the Sikh Light Infantry, a very distinguished regiment of the Indian Army, and we were indeed very delighted that this thing could take place. India put its best foot forward. We had our defense minister, and despite all the difficulties posed by the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, this event took place. And we'd like to congratulate the Russian Federation for organizing such a fantastic event. Prime Minister referred to President Putin as my dear friend when he spoke to President Putin, and he said that the India-Russia partnership can and will play an important role in the post-COVID world. So the COVID pandemic has, of course, imposed a lot of difficulties everywhere globally. India and Russia are no exception. But I think both how India has handled this pandemic and how Russia has handled this pandemic, I think is something that we can all be proud of. Despite all the difficulties, the cooperation has continued, the conversations have continued. I must say that India, even during the pandemic, more than 30 tons of medical medicines were airlifted from India to Russia, and this cooperation has continued. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Russian government and the Russian embassy in Delhi for facilitating the mutual evacuation of our nationals. There were a number of Russian nationals in India and a number of Indian nationals in Russia, and as part of the Vande Bharat program, more than 4,500 Indian nationals have moved back to India, have gone back home, over 29 flights, and some more flights will be continuing in the future. Having set the stage for the immediate context, of course, India-Russia relations have a very long history, and I'm sure an even better future. We are, of course, coming up to a very important milestone, as His Excellency Mr. Kudashev mentioned, which is the 20th year of the establishment of the strategic partnership between India and the Russian Federation. This is truly a special and privileged strategic partnership, quite unlike what we have with other countries. India and Russia relations are quite unique. They continue. There is a strong element of continuity even against the background of change. And the primary reason for this is twofold. One is, I think, there's a congruence of geopolitical interests over several decades. What is important to Russia is important to India, and what is important to India is important to Russia. And that is mutual security, mutual growth. I think we each rejoice in each other's growth and standing in the world, and this is something that will go forward. The second important pillar is the extraordinary personal trust and confidence relationship that exists between our leadership. Prime Minister Modi has met President Putin on a number of occasions. Since he became Prime Minister in 2014, Prime Minister Modi has met President Putin over 22 times. And there have been a number of bilateral summits. And we look forward, of course, to the visit of President Putin later this year to India, where the Indian government and the Prime Minister himself will have an opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to our very honored guest later this year. Ambassador Kudashev mentioned a number of international issues on which we have commonality of issues. Our bilateral relationship is, of course, also reflected in our participation in a number of international organizations, starting from the UN. From 2021-22, India will sit alongside the Russian Federation as a non-permanent member on the Security Council, and we look forward to working with Russia to take forward our common aims. We do want to make a difference. India is not any other country as a non-member of the Security Council. India will make a difference because India has something new to say. The message of hope, of partnership, of cooperation, and I think we will find in Russia a very reliable and credible partner as we take forward our cooperation in the UN. Of course, Russia has been steadfast in its support for India's permanent membership of the Security Council, and we, of course, appreciate Russia's support in this regard. India and Russia, of course, cooperate also in the G20, in the BRICS, in the RIC, in the SCO. These are important regional formats of cooperation, and they are important in their own right. But let me say that the India-Russia bilateral relationship will always prevail over any other multilateral format that we would like to that we cooperate in, and this is a point that needs to be taken forward. Of course, we have a joint position against terrorism. We have been one of the few countries which have said that there should be no differentiation between this form of terrorism and that form of terrorism. All terrorism is bad, and countries using their territory for terrorist purposes is something that should be the subject of isolation by the international community. And India and Russia, there is already a substantial amount of cooperation bilaterally, but this is something that we would like to take forward, including at the various international forums, including at the Financial Action Task Force Forum. Russia is involved in a very substantive Greater Eurasian Partnership. India fully welcomes Russia's engagement because what Russia can contribute to the Eurasian continent, stability and economic prosperity in the Eurasian continent, is something that India supports, and India looks forward to working with Russia to taking forward the Greater Eurasian Partnership project, which is including the negotiation of a free trade agreement between India and the Eurasian Economic Union. Similarly, we would like to seek from Russia understanding and support for India's engagement in the larger Indo-Pacific construct, which is a cooperative construct as far as we are concerned. We would like to take this forward in a spirit of consensus building, keeping it open for all to cooperate, where there is no place for expansionism, there is place for rule of law, there is space for cooperation, and there is space for economic engagement. So just as India is engaged on the Indo-Pacific and we would like Russia to partner with us, we would very much like to partner with Russia on the Eurasian on the Eurasian continent. The bilateral relationship, of course, has some key pillars. Everybody is familiar with that. We'll leave it to our experts to comment on them. Of course, the key traditional pillars are defense, energy, nuclear, and space. All four pillars are doing extremely well. Defense relationship is very steady. It conforms to India's national interests, and we have made it very clear that as far as India's defense and national security is concerned, India will be the sole arbiter of its own national decision making. And that applies to Russia as it applies to any other country in the world. With respect to energy, I think there have been very substantial energy investments from India in Russia and from Russia in India as a sign of mutual trust. And this is also an area that will progress very much in the years to come. Nuclear, as Ambassador Kudashev mentioned, there are 6 reactors being constructed with Russian assistance by India at Kudankulam, and this is only the beginning of a long and happy story that will unfold as we go along. Space, we have a very good tradition of space cooperation, and most importantly, India is working with Russia. As we speak, 4 Indian astronauts are getting trained, and they will be amongst them. They'll be selected for India's Gaganyaan project. Having said that, we also should look at the regional connectivity issues. The North-South corridor is already 20 years old. I think the time has come to take it forward with specific steps, and this is something that both governments should look at with the support of the commercial communities. When Prime Minister was in Vladivostok last year, we opened up a substantially new foreign policy initiative, which is of engagement with the Russian Far East. This is an initiative of immense importance. I don't think there has been, it ranks amongst some of the most far-reaching initiatives that has been taken forward by India in recent years, which is to engage with Russia on a substantially important region of the world, both in economic terms, in energy terms, in geopolitical terms, and in connectivity terms. So we look forward to connectivity issues, say, emerging from Yamal, where one of the largest hydrocarbon deposits in the world are located, to Chennai or to the eastern board of India, and the Chennai-Vladivostok connectivity is one part of that architecture. Having said that, I think we also need to see how both countries can also look at new opportunities for economic cooperation. Often it is said that India-Russia economic ties are not up to potential. That is true, but I think there is need for greater priority to be assigned to the diversification of our relationship, but also to look at the realities as they appear. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected India and Russia. So there is an economic impact, I think, but both governments are determined to see how they can contain this economic impact as much as possible and revive economic growth as fast as possible. So these are common objectives. I think there are opportunities both for India and Russia to see how this can be taken forward. Pharma is one area where India has already proven to the world that it has the potential to take care of the pharma needs of a vast majority of customers. We have credibility. There is faith in the Indian pharma industry. Similarly, in certain respects, Russia too has proven that it has substantial pharmacy capabilities. The first proven drug for mass distribution against the COVID pandemic in terms of therapy has already come into the Russian market, and I think we would encourage commercial entities both in India and Russia to look at opportunities how they can be taken forward. In the development of vaccines, of course, there are a huge number of vaccines being developed all over the world. I think there is also potential for India and Russia to cooperate on vaccine development. But rightly so, both governments have also seen how they can develop their own national economies and national industries. There is a Russian version of this, which has been announced by the Russian government. Prime Minister announced the Atmanirbhar Bharat program. I think that's an extremely important program. And my feeling is that Russia is one of the few countries that is extremely well positioned to take advantage of the opportunities that are there in India. Earlier this morning, Prime Minister addressed the Global 2020 event, and I'd like to say what he said on the Atmanirbhar Bharat program. He says Atmanirbhar Bharat merges domestic production and consumption with global supply chains. Atmanirbhar Bharat is not about being self-contained or being close to the world. It is about being self-sustaining and self-generating. We will pursue policies that promote efficiency, equity, and resilience. And we would definitely appeal to our Russian friends to look at opportunities in India. There are, of course, opportunities that are extremely well positioned in terms of defense production. Last year, there was a very important agreement that was signed between India and Russia on the joint production of spare parts in India of Russian origin equipment, and we are well poised to take this forward in quick measure, and some of the joint ventures are expected to come up this year as well. Pharma is something that I've already mentioned. Infrastructure, internal connectivity, internal waterways, the civil aviation sector, that is something that can be taken, can be addressed for mutual benefit. Digital technologies, as India and Russia faced similar challenges in the international system when globalization is in retreat, and especially technological sovereignty issues seem to come up in a particularly focused way. I think India and Russia, precisely because they have an element of trust and confidence, to look at opportunities to work together. India announced $1 billion worth of soft credit line, the first time that India has done vis-a-vis Russia. We would like the trading and economic community in India to look at opportunities that will go forward. We don't see our development of relations with Russia as a zero-sum game. I think in this period of major changes in the world, what is important is to understand each other's needs, to be respectful of each other's security interests, to look for mutually beneficial opportunities, and for the governments to promote people-to-people contacts. And let me end on that note, because I think the strongest bond of friendship between India and Russia, which is quite unparalleled, is that the very positive attitudes that are there in Russia about India and in India about Russia. That goes back several generations. Since Vijayji is on this video panel, we would very much encourage the political parties also to take forward cooperation at their level, to buttress what is already a good cooperation at the parliamentary contacts, but I think political parties can also take it forward. I would like to make a mention of the Ganga-Volga dialogue, which was an initiative that Prime Minister Modi and President Putin agreed when President Putin came to India in September of 2018. This is quite a unique dialogue. Both India and Russia are similar in one particular way. Both our civilizations are built around the development of ancient rivers. Volga occupies a very important place in Russian history and civilization. Similarly, the Ganga has a unique place in Indian history and civilization. So what we are today as people, what we are today as countries, has a lot to do with how we have grown around rivers. So this was the first dialogue that happened this year. It made a good beginning, but I think it's time to take this forward. This is also to take it forward on the 550th anniversary of Nikitin's journey to India. let us remember, it was not Vasco da Gama that first came to India. It is a Russian national who came from the heart of Russia to Tver. And where did he go? He went to Gujarat. Even then, Mr. Nikitin knew that Gujarat would be a very important place in India-Russia relations. So I think he chose his destination extremely well. Youth exchanges is extremely important. I think the older generation of Indians and Russians have a natural affection. But I think youth exchanges, getting the youth together is vitally important. A very good beginning has been made between youth exchanges of the Sirius Center in Sochi and the Atal Innovation Mission. There have already been 2 exchanges already, and we look forward to continuing these exchanges. And I guess in this video conference today, some of our colleagues from the media are also present. I would very much encourage the media community in India to pay a little more attention to Russia. There is already quite a bit of attention, but I think media exchanges, not only about each other, because I think media exchanges between India and Russia are important, but media exchanges of how we jointly understand the larger world, because there's so much of disinformation that is there in the outer global community in the media sector. Some of it is directed against Russia, some of it is directed against India. But whatever, I think both of us can contribute, both the media communities in India and Russia can contribute to a much fairer, a much more open and transparent media exchange environment. Having said that, let me again thank Vijayji for his excellent initiative. We really deeply appreciate his organizing this, and we'd be very happy to listen to the discussion and take forward any good suggestions that we have for the future of India-Russia relations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Verma. This was indeed a very comprehensive speech, and I really appreciate for your intervention. Now, as we have told in the beginning, there are some experts on India-Russia relations who are present today, and it is our great honor because they have spared their time. So 2 are from Russia and 1 from Delhi. So first of all, I would request Professor Tatyana Shomyan. She is the head of the Center of Indian Studies under Russian Academy of Sciences, Institute of Oriental Studies. I request her to give her brief remarks. Professor, please. Can you please unmute yourself?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we can hear you. Yes.
Yes. And first of all, I would like to express my very deepest gratitude for the invitation to participate in such kind of meeting. I think that maybe it is one of the first such kind of meetings, but I'm sure that we should continue this such kind of exchange of our position, our views, and that is very important for further development of relationship between our countries. I very much appreciate the speeches which has been done by our 2 distinguished diplomats, Ambassador Varma and Ambassador Kudashev. I think that they covered a lot of very important questions, very important subjects of relationship from military, political, economy, and some other, things in the international arena, our joint mission there, our joint position on many aspects of international relations. But I think that in context of this relationship, humanitarian and cultural relationship played a very important role, I think. And I think that, I am the person who devoted my life to the study India, and the same as my colleagues in the Institute of Oriental Studies, not only in the Institute of Oriental Studies, but some other in the logical studies, people in other institutions. And I think that that is the result of very important thing, in my point of view. We feel the, closeness, spiritual closeness of our people. I think that it is very important foundation for the development of relationship, not only in the sphere of culture and humanitarian, but also even in some other very important subjects as military, technological, trade, political, and international arena. And our distinguished speakers already mentioned some very important contacts of our great people, of our great sons of India and Russia. We were talking about the Lev Tolstoy and Mahatma Gandhi. Of course, this their correspondence, their relationship, they didn't meet, but they have this correspondence and they express their views in the letters. I think that it was very important part of our cultural life. You already mentioned Afanasy Nikitin, and really this is very, 550 years ago, this visit of Afanasy Nikitin in your country, and it was really before some Western travelers. And I think that it is also the part of our life. And we know that several years ago, the new expedition from India had a travel by cars and with the participation of cinema people and with the scholars. They traveled from Tver, from where Afanasy Nikitin started his travel to India, and they repeated all the way which has been done by representative there. And we already mentioned the very important event. I think that we celebrated together with our Indian colleagues and with our Indian people the jubilee of Mahatma Gandhi. In our institute, we organized a special conference and we prepared a book on Mahatma Gandhi. I think that it is very important event. We participated in Yasnaya Polyana, where also it was the special meeting in the memory of Mahatma Gandhi on the place of Lev Tolstoy. I think that it is very symbolical. I think that it is very important. I also would like to say that now I represent the Institute of Oriental Studies of Russian Academy of Sciences. Russian Academy of Sciences, we are from Center for Indian Studies, and our institute celebrated in 2018, celebrated the 200th anniversary after they founded the Oriental Studies Institute. It was very important for us. And I think that in India, that is also this jubilee had been mentioned, and it had been mentioned even in the joint statement, which has been done by our leaders, by Mr. Putin and Mr. Modi, in their joint statement. Jubilee of our institute had been mentioned, and India side also participated in celebrating of that. I think that it is also very important and very for us. And
thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to participate in this. And my best regards to our colleagues from India and from Russia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Thanks a lot for your very timely intervention. Now I request Mr. Arvind Gupta, who is heading Vivekananda International Foundation and a very senior diplomat in India, to present his thoughts. Shri Gupta ji, namaste. Arvind ji, you are there?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Can everyone else mute the microphone? Yes, please.
First of all, my many thanks to Vijay ji for inviting me to this excellent discussion that we've had. Two most distinguished diplomats, senior most diplomats in Indo-Russian setting today. They are here and they gave us their views on Indo-Russian relations. Then, of course, there are a number of other very senior people who are attending this. And I think the uniqueness of this initiative, getting two ambassadors, one from India, one from that country, and asking them to speak and interact with the public at large, is a unique initiative. I'm sure a lot good will come out of it. Now, listening to these excellent presentations, my mind went back many years ago, 1981, when I joined my first posting was in Moscow, and since then I've been in touch with the Indo-Russian relations and trying to follow it. You know, one thing that we always say in any Indo-Russian setting is that our friendship is time-tested. Almost like a cliche that Indo-Russian friendship is time-tested, or it has stood the test of time. But I think there is a lot behind this. Why we say that? Because you start from, I mean, of course, Afanis Nikitin was mentioned, but in more recent times, if you start from the 50s, we have survived the Cold War, and not only survived, our relationship began and was strengthened, and and Russia played, USSR then, played an important time in the consolidation of India. Then the post-Cold War years, the initial decades, I think that also Russia and India changed quite dramatically. They have changed. And yet we have this relationship thriving and surviving to the extent that every year our leaders meet and have been meeting uninterrupted. And this has given us a chance to look at the changing environment, strategic environment, and also global regional environment, and also, of course, new developments in bilateral relations, and consolidate that relationship. Now, in the post-COVID world, I think we have reached another turning point in the development of the new world order. And once again, we find that India and Russia are coming together, as was mentioned by both the ambassadors, that our cooperation in the post-COVID world is beginning to consolidate, and there are a whole lot of new areas which are opening up and which will take our partnership deep into the future, and it will be mutually beneficial. But I think in the recent past, we have also seen that very recently, in fact, when Defense Minister Rajnath Singh ji visited Moscow for the 75th anniversary of the Victory Day, in which our troops also participated. And I think that was a very solemn occasion, but also it reminded us of the sacrifices that the Indian soldiers made in that great patriotic war, or the World War II, And I think that needs to be remembered and commemorated. That is sometimes often forgotten in the histories of that Great War. But both in the First World War and in the Second World War, Indians made a tremendous sacrifice, and that led to the setting up of the world order and also peaceful nature of the world that we saw after the Second World War. So I'm glad that our troops were there and their contribution has been recognized. And this is something that in the commemorations of the events connected with that Great War, I think India's contribution should also be mentioned and celebrated. One reason for, I think, the solidity of our relationship is, as was mentioned by Ambassador Verma, the convergences that we continue to have. And we need to build on these convergences. And of course, the new areas that arise, we have to take those new concerns that may arise, we have to take them on board and continue to refresh our relationship. I think the important reason why this relationship remains unique is the sensitivity that each country has shown to each other's concerns. And this was also mentioned by Ambassador Verma. Now, this visit of Defense Minister Rajnath Singh ji to Moscow has another dimension which we have not mentioned here, but I thought I'll just flag it for this discussion. This came at a time when India was facing a very severe challenge to its security on its northern borders, and I think all of you are familiar with that. And the visit coming at this time and giving a chance to both sides to discuss these issues and take some action, that was, I think, a very, very important signal, and we appreciate that. Our Prime Minister, a few days ago, speaking at Leh, he also mentioned about how these some of the tendencies in this new world, and which are worrisome, and particularly relating to the expansionism that is taking place in some areas. And I think both sides should be concerned and worried about it, and we should discuss how this anachronistic feature is sometimes is coming back, and we have to discuss this and work together. And of course, both of us would have views on this, but certainly a deep discussion is required, while realizing that our relationship is not a zero-sum game. So that's, I think, one important point that I wanted to flag for this discussion. Ambassador Verma mentioned some concepts in our foreign policy. I think these are very important. Sometimes they are misunderstood. And he mentioned about Indo-Pacific. And I think there is a need to underline the fact that the concept of Indo-Pacific is an inclusive concept. And our Prime Minister at Shangri-La did mention that. And of course, with our Russian counterparts in think tanks, etc., we discuss this issue quite regularly as to what this concept of Indo-Pacific means. It is not a containment strategy. It is an inclusive concept. But of course, everybody has to play by the rules, in which were rule-based order is what I think we are talking about here. So, and then there was an important mention of the concept of Eurasia. India is already engaging with that concept, as was mentioned that the ongoing discussions on the FTA with the Eurasian Economic Union. I think that will be a very important landmark if we are able to arrive in agreement. Ambassador Kudashev also mentioned about the North-South International Transport Corridor, which has been going on for a while, but it is time to accelerate that. And if we did that, this will be an exceedingly important corridor, and which will benefit, and it will also strengthen the Eurasian concept on which Russia has taken the initiative and the lead. So that's something that India should really be talking about. And here, I think the discussions with our Central Asian republics, our friends in Central Asia, is also very important because they also form an important part of the Eurasian concept. Of course, Act Far East was also mentioned. This, I think, was a game changer when Prime Minister Modi articulated it during his visit to Vladivostok. It is a totally new concept for Indian foreign policy, and I think I would even take it as an extension of the India's Act East policy, but not going into the semantics of what a particular concept means or does not mean. The fact is that India wants to engage with the Far Eastern region of Russia, which is strategically very important, which is very rich, and where the Russians are inviting India to come in. And I think India has taken some initiatives like the line of credit, etc., or the connectivity initiative. This can really transform both India and Russia and can be an important factor in the development of the region itself. And I fully endorse the new areas which were mentioned by both the ambassadors. Of course, we have a very strong ongoing cooperation in many areas like defense, energy, etc. But new areas like artificial intelligence, nano, etc., which were also mentioned. And I would specifically mention here the cyber. I think India and Russia have a cyber security agreement, and this provides us an opportunity to look at this issue very carefully. Yes, Russia has taken a lead on cyber issues. It has several resolutions going on in the UN General Assembly, etc., which are concerning the norms and behavior in the cyberspace. Apart from that, that engagement, I would like to suggest that Indian and Russian scientific institutes, Indian and Russian companies, they should also strengthen their cooperation in both hardware and software insofar as cyber is concerned, and come up with new technologies, new products which they can use for themselves and for the rest of the world. So that's still an untapped area, and that is one area that I would like to flag for this discussion. And of course, now I'll just end with this endorsing this other area which was mentioned, and I think which has a huge potential, and that is in the health security. The cooperation on vaccines and cooperation in pharma that was mentioned. Indian government has set aside a 15,000 crore rupees fund for health sector in the Atmanirbhar framework. There's a lot of work that is being done, and in the last few months after the COVID, you would have seen how India has ramped up its capacity to produce ventilators and masks and so on, and now progress on vaccines. I think this is an area which requires urgent attention, and obviously many other areas which we mentioned, which are all important but on long term. But this one is the one which requires immediate attention. So with these remarks, I want to thank both the ambassadors for giving us a wonderful view, and also Mr. Chathariwala to give me this chance to share my views. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for your intervention. Now I request Ms. Olga Solodkova, who is an associate professor in the Faculty of World Economy and International Affairs in prestigious Higher School of Economics. She was also a part of Ganga-Volga Civilizational Dialogue, which was held in January 2020 in New Delhi. Ma'am, please go ahead.
Hear me?
Can you? Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yes. Yes. Wonderful. What I would like to say. First of all, thank you very much for invitation. I really appreciate it, and I can say that the ambassador of India in Russia, Venkatesh Varma, end his speech with the words that we need to do something with the real contacts between Indians and Russians. And from my point of view, it's the most important sphere. Working at the university, I'm talking with my students, and first question which I received from them, how to visit India and how to make it really safe and how really to enjoy this travel in India. That's why I would like to speak about the branch of tourism which is suffered now mostly all over the world. But we are speaking now about the future, first of all. And from my point of view, this sphere, to increase the bilateral tourism and exploring natural avenues for economic and commercial partnership is the most important for our countries. And I would like to say about some real problems to increase tourism between our countries. It was spoken a lot about possibility of the visits both countries without visa for 21 days, and there were plans to have opportunity to visit to India without visa for groups first of all. And from my point of view, if it will happen at the end, it will be the best thing which can increase the number of tourists to the both countries, because still the number of tourists to Russia is from India is about 100,000, even less, 90,000, and from Russia is about 200,000. It's really a very small number. And from my point of view, there are some obstacles, with which the tourists met in India. First of all, it's a problem to have a really good hotels of high class. I mean the hotels of 5 stars. You can find these hotels in Delhi, but it's rather hard to find such level hotels all over the India. And first of all, it's very the main part of visits, tourist visits to India, it's to the North India, mainly to the places of interest devoted to the Mughal period, first of all. And more than 50%, as I remember, that is the visits to the northern part of India. And only few directions are open to the east of India. And it's a great pity for me because I met only few persons who visit Andaman Islands. It is the best beaches and the best beaches all over the world. And it's just a treasure. It's just a treasure of India. And the problem is also with the very expensive inner flights, first of all, and the problems of the hotels of the high class. So you can't find on the Andaman Islands a hotel more than 3 stars. And this is the real problem for the tourists, that India needs more than 90,000 suites, rooms on the high class hotels, and it means it's needed really great a number of investigation into
Thank you.
this year. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just I can only add a few words that very
Sure.
okay. It's very important to develop yoga tourism and medical tourism, and it needs more advertisement on the state base. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So the last intervention will be by my senior colleague, Dr. Anirban Ganguly, who is the chairman of the Foundation for Public Awareness and Policy, scholar and author on several topics of contemporary and also civilizational issues. So Anirban, please.
Vijayji, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be able to join you here. And I'm hardly your senior colleague. In fact, I keep learning a lot from you. And it's a constant process. So thank you so much for your kind-hearted and warm welcome. I just want to be very extremely brief because I joined late. We had a program and I've been hearing for some time. I was just feeling what is an ideal among the many possibilities? What is an ideal afternoon? An ideal afternoon is an afternoon when you're discussing Russia with Tatiana Shomyan and the way ahead. I think there cannot be anything more ideal than this at this moment. So I'm really delighted that you have put together such a wonderful panel, and especially Ambassador Verma, our very dear friend, Dr. Binay Pradhan, Ambassador Kudashev. So in January, when we met, the SPMRF and the MEA, we were discussing Ganga-Volga dialogue. And today, a few months down the line, it's a kind of a pandemic dialogue that we are having. A dialogue on pandemic or a pandemic dialogue. Now, I still wait for the day when I will be able to take a book by Rahul Sankirtayan and sit on the bank of Volga and read. I'm waiting for that day when the pandemic passes and we can again go on the bank of Volga. But I think what is extremely symbolic and important about this, in fact, your 9th May 75th victory parade really showed how Russia was handling the pandemic. It symbolized Russian spirit of resilience towards any kind of, so 75 years ago, they displayed the Russian spirit of resilience against a particular adversary. And 75 years after that display of resilience, we again see how Russia is displaying a spirit of resilience against the pandemic. And I think there's a lot that we can both really do, and you have all your experts, ambassadors have discussed this. For me, it is extremely important that we are continuing with this dialogue at various levels. And I think, therefore, this interaction especially is indicative of that urge. And as I have repeatedly said, and we have discussed this with Ambassador Kudashev and with our Russian friends and scholars, that post the collapse of the Soviet Union, there has been absolutely a huge paradigm shift and change that has taken place, and that is a fait accompli. But it is time now, and ever since Prime Minister Modi's arrival on the national scene, he has been extremely focused, regular, determined in taking this partnership and this dialogue to the next level, and to the next level of knowing each other and knowing ourselves. And therefore, I see that it's a continuous movement that is taking place. And we are discussing now, we have discussed before, we shall continue discussing. The invitation to President Putin has already gone for the next summit. And I think Dr. Gupta mentioned Defense Minister Rajnath Singh's visit to Moscow, the first visit undertaken by a senior leader of India, of the Indian government during this period. So I'm extremely hopeful that be it strategic partnership, be it trade, economy, be it culture and Indology, we have the matriarch of Russian Indology with us here, Professor Shomyan. this is the dialogue, the interaction is gaining momentum. And this momentum will continue and pick up, and I'm sure we'll be able to discover and explore many such avenues which can further strengthen our bond. So this is what I really wanted to say. Thank you so much, Dr. Vijayji, for inviting, for having me over here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anirban, and thank you, everyone. Now, the final part of the program, vote of thanks by my colleague and friend, Dr. Ashwin Johar. Ashwin, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vijay Chathaiwale. Before I start my remark by giving thanks to everyone, I think a lot of my friends from Moscow, they wanted me to speak a bit in Russian. So I would like to thank in Russian. Уважаемый Николай Рашитович и господин Варма, я благодарю, что вы приняли время слушать эту программу. И специально хочу благодарить все такие друзья, которые выступали из России и из Москвы. Это был очень положительный разговор. И мы будем организовать еще такие программы, чтобы мы передали еще импульсы индийские и российские контактами. У нас только небогатое прошлое, и тоже у нас есть блестящее будущее вместе, совместное блестящее будущее. Спасибо большое. Your Excellency, Ambassador Kudashev, Your Excellency, Ambassador Verma, thank you so much for your valuable inputs. I think since we are talking of partnership beyond pandemic, besides pandemic has brought a lot of other difficulties, but one difficulty and one disheartening matter which it has brought, that in this year, in the year of 2020, our beloved leaders who enjoy best of the chemistry together, President Putin and Honorable Prime Minister Modi, were supposed to meet 5 times in this alone in 2020, and which is not happening because of this pandemic. And India-Russia relationship has always been time-tested. We always stood by each other in all the thicks and thins. And specifically, I would say that not going into statistics of any business, but I will say that this relationship has been built upon a lot of emotions and support to each other's culture, each other's integrity, each other's security of their nations. And we as FPAP will definitely try to organize more programs of such kind in Indo-Russia relationship. And thank you everyone for coming and taking part in this segment of our series, Partnership Beyond Pandemic in India-Russia relationship. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you. Namaste.